Come to the chamber, please.
Thank you, Mike.
Meeting to order, and the clock says 6:01, but that may not be the right time, but we'll call it 6:01. And this is a regular meeting for Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
I will. Tim Hale.
Here.
Stephanie Nowers. Here. Dee McKee. Robert Yunt.
Here.
Moki Tu. Here. Ron Bernier.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you do have a quorum.
Thank you. Is there anything the members would like to pull from the consent agenda? Yes.
I think it's AM 23005.
Okay, you have that? Uh-huh.
I have one I'd like to ask some questions about, and that is AM 23-004.
Okay. 04 and 05.
Carlos.
Is there anything else from anybody else? I see a couple mics on. Did you just forget
Oh,
to
I'm
tell
so
them, or did you, we're going to add something? Okay. Are there any other changes to,
Which one did Miss McKee pull?
23-004.
Thank you.
Is there any other changes to the agenda? Okay. See none, then the agenda is approved. You all stand, please, and Mr. Attorney, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on our agenda is minutes from the preceding meetings. Is there any changes? Okay, hearing none, then the minutes are approved as presented. The next item we have is agency reports. Do we have a report from the cities? I don't see any. Any reports from the school district? Don't see anybody. We do have a report from the state of Alaska, right, sir?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the Assembly and staff. Todd Smolden with the Governor's Office and the Matt Sioux. And I think mostly I have some comments from watching the previous meeting. I feel like you've been here probably for 100 years now, but it was actually really wonderful to see the process that took place. Members of the public who are bringing concerns before you. I really enjoyed the questions by the Assembly, the clerk's work. I really think you've done a fantastic job of trying to meet the concerns of the public. And I guess the only disappointment I had was in the state of Alaska, and specifically not the division of elections, but some of the things that we have in statute that make it really difficult for you to do what you would like to do. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but last session, there were 21 pieces of election integrity legislation that were put forward to the legislature. One of them was something that I actually worked on a little bit with the governor that included 8 different things, and those things would have addressed most of Assembly Member Nauer's questions and other questions that came up in terms of voter rolls, automatic voter registration, and things like that. And it's my understanding that one of those 21, which was a bill by Senator Schauer put forward, had one hearing, and it was in his own committee. And so I really I liked the comment about Assembly coming forward as a body to try to encourage the legislature to take a look at some changes that can be made to help you serve your public better. And I think not only you as an assembly, but also you as a body working with perhaps other bodies in the state, whether it's Fairbanks, Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage, whoever you can work with to try to encourage some more diligent work on the legislature's part to look at voter rolls and some of those other things. I work for the governor. I don't work for the lieutenant governor, and lieutenant governor is responsible for elections in Alaska, but I have talked to the lieutenant governor, and I know she would like some legislative changes to fix some of the things that were brought up. So I just wanted to, again, say thank you for the work that you've been doing on this. The only other comment, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them, but the governor will have his State of the State speech next Monday on the 23rd. And so might be a good chance for you to kind of hear what his priorities are moving forward as far as continuing with public safety, education, resource development, and other items. So that's next Monday, State of the State on the 23rd. I will take questions if anybody has any, but I know you actually have a pretty, looks like it might be a short one. So so I would not be offended if you didn't ask any questions. But.
Yeah, we're going to start with you. Goodbye. No,
All right, have a good night.
No, I'm just kidding. Anyone have a question? All right, thanks, Don. I don't believe there was a joint assembly school board meeting. So does any of the assembly have any public relations reports? Okay, Mr. Manager, we're ready for you then.
Right on. So thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll invite the Borough Assessor to come forward. Every year at around this time, we do an annual update to the Assembly to kind of give you an idea of what assessed value, appraised value is looking like in terms of where that will lead us. It's one of the, well, it's really the key input to the budget process. So this will give you a kind of a snapshot view of what happened this past year in terms of what the assessor's office is seeing. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Buddy and he can walk you through that and we'll take your questions.
Buddy, the clicker is right there in front of you too. The board just slides.
All right. And that has to point towards,
It doesn't, just click the button. It should work just fine.
thank you. I'm Buddy Evelyn, the Borough Assessor, and we've got a presentation that we've brought updated that you've seen several times before, but it will definitely hopefully answer some questions to where we've seen the market go this last year. Thank you for giving me your time here.
Try the other button to the right. It's rubbed off. There you go. You're good.
Oh. So here's some important dates. So the assessment notices will be mailed out January 27th, and the appeal period starts January 30th and runs through February 28th. And I do want to note that the supply chain issues, the printer is not able to get the blue cards that are normally sent out, so they will be white. So I want to bring it to people's attention so they watch for those. Anchorage has had the same issue, I've noticed. If there's concerns on the valuations of a home, it is best if they call in that 30-day period when we have an opportunity to address concerns, not when the tax bills go out. It's very important. And here's a lot of the updates that the clerical staff has done. I do want to note that this senior citizen and disabled veterans exemption program, we processed 1,057 applications this year. That is up from 683 the previous year. So the program is definitely growing. And we've got parcel improvements and vacant parcels in the borough. And then this next slide, it leaves a little concern because the appraised value, which is the value that the total value in the borough, and the assessed value is the taxable value in the borough. And the appraised value in the borough went up 10.51% this year over last year's appraised value, even though the home values went up 8.4%. It started out this year looking very similar to last year, had a pretty big increase in the first half of the year, and then kind of slowed down a little bit and ended up at 8.4 on residential houses for a median increase. This is just another representation for the previous slide. Let's look at value.
Not going.
I think I reached down too far. So on this slide, it looks at all the exemptions and deferments in the borough. The total exemption is $4,459,139,850, and that's up this year from last year's being at $3,891,226,166. And I want you to notice here that our senior disabled veterans, last year it was 45.05% of the exemptions. And this year it's up to 49.43% of the exemptions that we have in the borough. We did get an influx. I think it brought to people's attention with the vote, and we got more people that were eligible for the program apply that may not have known prior to that. And then we've got new construction by value that we've added in the borough this year and previous years. Commercial's down slightly. We do have, it seems like stuff got started late this year. And out there's quite a few commercial ones that are setting at 1% complete for whatever reason. We had 600 new homes added to the record this year, and 48 multifamilies and 21 new commercial buildings.
I was doing it for you, buddy.
All right, thank you. So the average home value, assessed value in the borough is now $354,000. So it's on a steady climb each year. And then the last page of this report is the appeal process and how many contacts we have. Usually assessments has been running around 1,000 contacts each year. And I'd like to explain a little bit how this process works. When people call in questioning or have a concern on their property, the clerks will take the call, they'll take the concern and some information, and then the appraisers will call them back. Most generally, we try to do that within 24 hours or the next day. And then first thing that they're going to want to do is go over the inventory, make sure our records are accurate before we get into the depth of whether the value is right. And then address whatever concerns that somebody may have, why they don't think their house is worth what it's assessed at. So, but usually if the information we have is correct, the values are reasonable to what the market would pay for it. And that's all I have. Unless you have any questions.
Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so if you could just kind of briefly describe the process by which you arrive at the appraised value of the home, if you don't mind.
Okay. So what we do is we take last year's assessed value and we take the sales that we get back each year and we compare that sale to the home and look at the ratio. So we do assessed value divided by that sale price. Then that will tell us in math what the median is of whether we're high or low compared to the sale prices. Mm-hmm. And then we move that towards the sale price of that median of the group. And then we have set the value at 94% this year, which we typically do because we know half of the houses are going to be over that line just because we're doing it on mass appraisal, statistical, rather than individual appraisal practices.
Okay, and is that process is somewhat governed by state laws and borough code, or is that, or is it an industry standard, or what?
It's an international standard to do it because we don't have no way to have enough staff to do a private fee appraisal on every property in the borough.
Sure. Okay, thank
So
you.
we have to do it.
Go ahead, sir.
So I just want to hit a point through the mayor to Mr. Hale's question, and you said it, so I just want to make sure it gets said again so the assembly understands. So when you said 94%, right? That's an important figure because that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's determined locally, right? So theoretically, the assessor could go out and set that at 100% or set it at 96%, and that varies municipality to municipality. We set it at 94%, as Buddy described, as a way to accommodate the fact that it's statistics. So some houses are going to be below that and some are going to be above that. So the borough already makes a concession to walk that down to 94%. I think in the past you said prior to 2 years ago, we
were shooting for 96, but with the dispersion and unknown parts of the market right now, inflation, we've figured it's safer to be at the 94 and make sure we don't have more houses over-assessed over the 100% mark.
Yes. So that's an important point. I just want the assembly to understand, like that's, it could be as it's been done in the past with 96, but what he's recommended is we walk that down a little bit more to make sure we have fewer instances of where folks would be over-assessed, over-appraised, right? So, and statistically, I mean, I guess I'll just say it, you're giving up revenue by doing that, which is not, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just to understand that we do recognize there's some volatility and some dispersion, and that's a way that we can help to offset that in terms of lining out how we establish those values, which feeds the budget process.
And so that percentage, the process is not outlined in code or anything like that. It's just kind of a best practices in-house way that international, like you said, international standards. There isn't a particular borough code that, I guess this would be a question for the attorney. Is there a particular borough code that governs how the assessments are done?
No, because there's different valuation methods they could use. And then ultimately there's the Board of Equalization for appeal for people that think they're over-assessed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Assemblyperson Hours.
Mayor. This amount of exempt property is something that I think we need to be conscious of because I think it's potentially a risk factor for our finances since we get most of our funding out of property taxes. And if we've been blessed with a rising market, but it seems like it's cooling off. And in terms of paying for all the things the borough wants, if we start to see less and less of an increase, that's going to affect our overall revenue. So I would love some more kind of analysis to the assembly to kind of look at how quickly, particularly the senior citizen disabled veteran is increasing, because we've changed the rules on that. I'd just like to look at, when you look at page 6, maybe, when you look at appraised versus taxable property, to maybe have some percentages on these bars so we can see, if it used to be that we had 10% that we were exempting, and now we're at 20%, and maybe how much of that is the senior citizen disabled veteran. I'd just like some visibility into how quickly the senior citizen disabled veteran exemption is increasing. And I know there was a story today about the graying of our population. So I think it's increasing at a faster rate than an overall population. I'm not wedded exactly to you giving us those exact tables, but just those are 2 ways I thought about if that would help me to kind of see that and weigh it as a risk factor when we're talking about our strategic planning. I think it's something that is a potential that we need to kind of keep an eye out for. So if you have better ways you think of categorizing for us to show us kind of the increase in what some projections might be going into future years,
Okay.
I'm totally open to that. And then I just had one other question. 8,800 address changes on page 3 that you processed.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is it? I'm sure there's new properties, but 8,800 actual properties in the valley needed their address changed in 1 year? I guess that surprised me. What is that? Who's changing all those addresses?
Yeah, and a lot of times they're getting those off permanent funds, and they're not always, people don't always remember to address that. That is something we have thought about trying to get done, where someone could do it online and then maybe push it into the system once it's been checked. But it is definitely a labor task.
Okay. This is people changing where their bills are getting mailed, not their actual address changes.
Right,
which
we're
people
not
get with
changing
new
the
property.
address
Okay.
of the parcel, we're
Okay.
changing.
That
mailing
makes more
address.
sense. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, did you have a question, sir?
Earlier, you had said when you guys get your sales information back, I was just wondering where you collect that from. So seeing what properties are selling for and everything.
We send property questionnaires out to the buyer and the seller.
Percentage of those would you say get returned? If you send out 100 of those, about how many get returned?
I think we get about a third of them back, because we
third?
do send 2 sets. If the first one doesn't get returned, we do try a second time. And we've been updating records quicker off the website, so it's still fresh in people's minds when they get their PAQ. So I think that helps.
Okay. And do you guys collect that data from anywhere else or just from those cards?
We collect it everywhere we can find data, but I mean, the realtors and stuff are kind of shielded with it, so they're not willing to share a lot. But the appraisers, we get a little bit from them, and a little bit from others, wherever we can get it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Similar person, Benir, did you have a question?
The 94% that we're at currently, and you were at 96% 2 years ago, who determines the change in those percentages?
I do. I approve that.
And
Because I look at the statistics, so that it depends on how tight the sales are, is depending on how comfortable I am with not over assessing people.
and the 94%, you're just not as comfortable with sale prices and stuff, or the actual?
A little more dispersion because of the market irregulars. I mean, it was a bidding war for the first half of the year, and now it's definitely cooled off, the realtors that I've talked to.
Yeah, thank you.
Assemblyperson McKee?
This is sort of a specific question, and I'm looking at the differences between assessed and appraised, and it's pretty close, and I think that's great, and I love the process that you were talking about. Philosophical question, I guess it was, when we were talking about Beverly Lakes, 7 realtors said that a property didn't lose value, would lose value if you made it into if you changed to an LMP for that area. And you, the assessor, said, no, it doesn't make any difference. How do you go up against 7 realtors and say, no, it doesn't? I don't know. I'm just asking you how you arrived how you arrive at decisions like that when you got a whole bank of them over here saying, no, that's not so.
Well, we're setting the values on actual sales. We're following the market. We're not trying to lead the market. So we are definitely trying to get the information back and then see what it's telling us rather than us assuming what it may change.
So that wasn't just a thing you pulled out of the air. That was based on examination of other like areas.
Yeah, we try to, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Further questions from the assembly? Oh, yeah, go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of wrap it up just real quick, a couple talking points. So number one, that 8.4% in average increase in residential values, that'll be a big factor. And we'll talk more about that in April when we do the department or the budget presentations. That'll be something you'll hear again. Because that's kind of that benchmark. Last year, I think that was around 13% residential. So as you can see, it's much different. Probably a little bit easier to deal with now that we have to figure out how to build a budget around that. So just wanted to make sure that that number stood out to you. We will get you an updated analysis on the senior disabled vet exemption. And then just a reminder on that appeal period. It's super important. Obviously, when notices go out, phone calls will sometimes go up for assembly members. Encourage them to call the assessor's office soonest so that we can leverage that month appeal period to the greatest degree possible, so we don't get into a situation where somebody missed that period and then it's a challenge, right? Our hands are a little more tied. So that's really one of the takeaways as well, just to make sure that we get that word out to the public. So if there are concerns or they don't agree with that notice, they take advantage of that opportunity. That's all, Madam Mayor.
Okay, further questions? Okay, all right. Good job, sir. Do you have further report?
That's all for
Oh,
the
I'm
manager's
sorry.
comment. I'm sorry.
Assembly person two, I'm sorry.
I think last year, this isn't really a question, this is just, last year we talked about the tax assessments going out, the tax pay, blue cards, and we talked about putting the landfill rebate on those cards to save us in the printing of the people. I just want, is this the time to talk about that again to make sure that we don't forget about that?
Through the mayor to Assembly Member Twos. Yes, we did talk about that last year, putting it on the tax billing notices. We looked into it and one, there wasn't a lot of space on those notices to get it done. The file goes out to the printer this week. So, I mean, right now we can't put it on there. And it was actually easier and for us to do a separate mailing for it. I can give you all the other reasons there in my notes, but I'm winging this off the top of my head. There were reasons why it didn't happen as effectively as it could have.
Okay, follow up, sir. Okay. Okay. And you're done with your report then, sir? Okay. All righty, Mr. Attorney, you do have a couple of reports for us, huh, sir, if you're ready?
Thank you,
Mhm.
Mrs. Mayor. So, Mayor and Assembly members, I was talking with Assembly Member Hale here, I believe it was in December before he left for his last rotation up at work. And he asked me to brief the Assembly tonight about service areas, and in particular, police service areas. I think the manager might have mentioned it last meeting. I don't know if you did or not. I wasn't here. I'm sorry. So 2 weeks ago, I think the manager's report out to you, the weekly report, had an update and a refresher about the police service area task force report. And so what Assembly Member Hale asked me to talk to the Assembly about tonight was just a basic overview on how a service area would form. So, because there may be a little misunderstanding about how service area might work for a police service area or for any service area. So for the Assembly members, I guess except for Assembly Member Bernier and McKee, if you remember 2 years ago, I kind of went through the Constitution little by little for the local government part. Remember, I had some slides. And one of the things that's in our Constitution is service areas. And service areas were conceived as a way to provide limited governmental services for areas that aren't ready to incorporate as a city or a borough, right? So we're already incorporated as a borough. And then you would think that, well, okay, you get a service area, another service area, another service area, and pretty much the weight of services grows to the point where poof, a city would then pop up. Something like Talkeetna might come to mind. Might be a good example of a next city that might someday form in the borough, because you have a road service area, you have a fire service area, you have a flood control service area, you have a water and sewer service area. And then, someday it might happen. I know there was a run at Big Lake as well to incorporate it at some point. Nonetheless, service areas are a mechanism to provide for services that aren't already provided by a borough. So I'll confine the discussion to boroughs because that's what we're talking about here. So if you want to form a service area, at the end of the day, what you do is you go to the voters and you say, would you like this service in this area? This is what you get, and this is what we would expect it would cost the first year. You could do that with any power that's not prohibited by law. So you cannot do a cocaine legalization service area, but you could do a daycare service area. You could do a restaurant improvement service area. You could do a health inspector service area. We, in fact, have road service areas and fire service areas. Out at Port McKenzie, we actually have a service area called the Port McKenzie Service Area that's road and fire and utilities and roads, streets and drainage, pipelines. So it's all kinds of things empowered to be able to do. And so the question is, how do you get to that end game? How do you get to where you present it to the voters and they vote? Well, our code has two mechanisms. One mechanism is a group of people owning 50% of the property in the proposed service area can present a petition to the clerk that says, we want to form a service area in whatever area they designate to do whatever it is they want. The clerk would then take that petition, analyze it to make sure that it's 50% of the property owners, and then hand it over to the manager, who would then run an analysis and figure out what's being proposed. Is it cost effective? Does it make sense? And then bring it to the assembly for the assembly to decide whether to vote to put it on the ballot for people to vote on or not. The second way you then get it to the ballot would be for an assembly member to bring forward a resolution containing much the same information, and the assembly passing a resolution directing the manager to do that same analysis and then bringing it back to the assembly to potentially vote on and put before the voters to decide whether they want it. So when it comes to something like a police service area, because that's what we were talking about in particular, it would be, whether it's assembly initiated or citizen initiated, it would simply be somebody sitting down and figuring out what's the geographic location of the service and what is the proposed service to be done. The manager, in evaluating it, would address things like whether it should be done via contract. So we already do serve some service areas by contract, which is our road service areas. Or would you hire borough employees to do it? That's like our fire service areas, right? So central fire service area, actually all of our fire service areas, we use on-call, we call them on-call responders, but they are borough employees. They're just not regular full-time in large part. So how you run a service area, whether it's contract or not, what the administration looks like, those are really questions for the manager to kind of, and when I say manager, of course, it would be delegated to other people, and there'd probably be, lots of people internally working on it. Those would be things for the manager to determine, to advise the assembly on. When it comes to the power to be able to do it, from the legal perspective, it's pretty straightforward. It's public safety in a geographic area with an expected tax rate of whatever for the first year, and the voters vote on it, and they either vote yes or they vote no. And if voters vote yes, once you have a power to provide the service, it then becomes up to the borough to determine best through the assembly, through the manager, through the assembly, to determine best how to provide that service. Again, just like with road service areas or just like with fire service areas, you got a lot of management decisions on how you would do that, how you would stand it up. And that would be all kind of preliminary in the report by the manager. But then if it did pass, then it would, the rubber would really hit the road, and you'd have to figure out exactly how to implement the services. Does that make sense? And are there questions? Not you, no, I'm kidding. Go ahead. It's up to the mayor.
Oh, Assemblyperson Hale?
And not so much a question as just a few comments on the subject. Last fall when I was running, I had a lot of folks ask me about, law enforcement and police services. And, it's been 3 years since we voted on the advisory vote for police powers. What did you guys figure out? What are you guys doing about it? And, most of my district is, pretty much wrapping around the city of Palmer. And I was thinking, if we could give these people the power to set up police service areas that could like contract with Palmer PD or something, then maybe they could decide on their own that this neighborhood could decide, hey, we're gonna actually, have some police patrols here, and we're gonna pay for it ourselves. And so I went to the attorney and I said, hey, I'd like to see an ordinance that would give us the power to, create these police service areas, with a vote of the people and everything. He was like, oh, you already have that power. And so I did not realize that we already have that power to create those service areas. And I don't think very many people in the borough understand that the people have the power to ask for police service in their neighborhood if they're willing to pay for it. And so I asked for a little update here, and I'm kind of hoping that the manager might do a little public education on the fact that neighborhoods could, through petition and an election, come to us and say we would like to establish a police service area and contract with Wasilla PD or Palmer PD if they were willing to do so, and have some patrols in our neighborhood. So I was just hoping maybe we could get a little more education out there to the folks who are interested in this stuff, who do want police patrols in their neighborhoods.
For any other? Okay, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
When you say neighborhoods, could it be that specific? Or would it be more of like a community, right? So Big Lake as an example, but I mean, are we talking like specific 40 or 60 house subdivisions could do this, like actual neighborhood?
So the formation of a service area, there are several steps, right? The first step is the manager would analyze the proposal, come to you, tell you what you think. Even if he says, I don't think this is going to work, if the assembly says, it's their neighborhood, let them decide, and you put it on the ballot, then you got to convince the assembly, yes, it should go forward to the ballot. Then if the voters vote yes, you get the power. In Fairbanks, there are over 100 road service areas. They literally have road service areas of like 15 lots in one road service area, and that's it. So there are administrative costs and overhead and management things to think about if you're going to have a bunch of small service areas, because there are of course some.
And when you say put it on the ballot, who would vote on that? Would it be like a lake management plan?
It would be a vote. To get it, what you're doing when you get a service area is you are getting a power that you don't have. The only way to get that is to go to the ballot, official, run by the clerk. Like you go to your polling place and they go, oh, you get this ballot type. It will be a question on the ballot. And so it's not, I guess the assembly could.
But only the people that live in that said area.
Correct.
Can vote on it.
Correct.
Okay. So in a sense, it's kind of like a lake management plan. I mean, you could set it up. It just comes with a lot more administrative and costs.
The big difference is you can create or abolish a lake management plan without public input if you really wanted to. It might not be politically popular,
right,
but legally permissible. It is not legally permissible to set up a new service area without a vote. Okay. You have to get the power from them because we don't have the power to do it right now. So really, you're just like I've always said, and anytime we talk about a new borough service, you can get virtually any power you want if you go to the voters and ask. So when you're going to the voters, you're just going to a more limited pool for that service area.
Yeah. He's passed away now, but Wasilla's last mayor, I think, sat on that advisory board and looked at police powers. And we had a lot of conversations about it. I think the big sticking point was that the Alaska State Troopers were not willing to refund us. Is say we try to set up like a Matsup Borough Police Department. How much do the troopers pay? Can we have that money from the state? And right, it's and even if they did, legislatures change over, they could take the money back. It'd be very risky. We might end up having to foot the whole bill ourselves and not get any help from the state on an overall, looking at the whole community. But yeah, I mean, I guess if a small area wanted to do it themselves or,
And those types of things you're addressing, again, as the lawyer, I really try to stay in my lane on these issues. Those are administrative and political concerns. You would have to go to the voters to get the power to even consider that, right? Because just because you have a power doesn't mean you have to exercise it. So, I mean, obviously, again, political considerations, if voters say, we want you to do this, and then you don't, you might all get voted out. But that's something different, because I will point out, we have had since 1985 the power to regulate daycare facilities, and we don't. Because no assembly has ever seen fit to go into that. But the state legislature saw fit to grant us that power. Nobody knows why. I don't know of any second-class boroughs that do regulate daycare facilities, but it's a power that's given to us. So when you talk about, the concerns over money and how it might work administratively, that's really part of the manager's report to up front before you decide whether to put it on the ballot.
Did you say?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago in the Weekly Post, thank you, Madam Mayor, we did put a summary. George Hayes sat on that committee as well. So we put a summary of their findings because there were multiple options. This kind of necks it down to one of the options, which was to create a police service area. So that's in the Weekly Post. There's a report. It's on the website. Like, the public can access that for the entire committee report from a few years ago. If we were kind of going out of the gate to actually analyze this, I think our coming out position would be to contract it out and to find, Wasilla or Palmer PD and see if there's a willingness for them to potentially provide the service on a contracted basis. So if we were to look at that just from not from a legal perspective, but from a feasibility perspective, we would have to find a willing partner. So, and kind of figure out what that might cost and whatnot. So I think it would be fairly complicated, but there is a path that we could move forward on if there were enough interested folks to try to figure out what that cost might look like and how we might draw a geographic boundary that's appropriate. And if we were to do that, like if somebody were to show up tomorrow and say, I want you to do this, I assure you we'll reach out to whatever assembly member that's in your district before we go running down a road. Because I think, and to Mr. Hale's point about the public education, I'm all for that. But I also don't want to create confusion. I mean, like we saw tonight with elections, folks thought because we were having a meeting, we were revisiting an ordinance. And it's like, I don't want people to think, oh, the borough's moving forward, they're trying to create a police force, like our police department. That's not what we're doing. So I just think we have to kind of be careful with that, because I think at the same time, folks could take that and misunderstand it, when what we're saying is if there is an appetite for that in certain areas of the borough, there is a way that could come to fruition if residents desired that.
Assemblyperson Hale?
Yeah, so definitely not talking about any kind of borough-wide or even non-area-wide or even core area police services here. The example that I like to use, and this is extremely unlikely, but bear with me, is if, say, Lazy Mountain decided that they wanted to contract with Palmer PD to have, patrols on the mountain. They could figure out how much patrolling they wanted. They could go to like Palmer PD and they could work out whatever deal, and then they would pay, let's say whatever your road service base rate is. In my district, it's generally about 4 mils, right? So if they wanted to pay 4 mils to have a cop drive up and down Lazy Mountain twice a day, then they could do that. They could do that right now, but I don't think people understand that they can come to us and say, we would like to have this small police service area. And it was one of the things that I spoke to a lot of people about is, maybe we could set it up so that we could have these small police service areas. And when I went to talk to the attorney, he was like, oh, you can already do that. And I had no idea that we could already do that. So I just kind of wanted to make sure everybody knew that we can already do that.
Deputy Mayor? Mm-hmm.
Could you put your own court system there with it and have like your own, so maybe theft would be a year in jail instead of a slam, pat on the wrist? No, state doesn't allow it.
Right, so what it says is, in a second-class borough, you can do any power not prohibited for a first-class borough by law. You're prohibited by law from prescribing courts or establishing courts or prescribing the jurisdiction, because it's reserved to the state.
Shucks.
Assembly person hours.
I was just gonna say kudos on getting the attorney to tell you you could do something.
Come on.
Assembly person Veneer. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so like, after the troopers shut down Talkeetna's barracks, they left Trappers Creek, Caswell, Talkeetna without troopers, right? And I've heard a lot from my constituents about the length of time in case of emergency and stuff. So if we contract it out, it would be with the troopers who already pulled out. Is there another option?
I'm gonna keep my eye on the attorney as I start speaking words, because if he starts shaking his head no, I'll notice pause. But through the mayor to Mr. Bernier, not necessarily. I mean, right now you have the school district contracting with Palmer PD and with Wasilla PD, and Wasilla PD is providing school resource officers outside of the jurisdiction of the city. So theoretically, there's nothing to preclude you, if Wasilla, as an example, is a willing partner, to contract with the city of Wasilla to provide that service in Talkeetna. So it doesn't have to be Alaska State Troopers, right? Like the school district, and I think before staffing shortages, had a city of Wasilla officer at Houston High School or Houston Junior Senior. So completely out of their jurisdiction, not connected, geographically at all. So I think you could do that. You would just have to figure out what's that cost going to be and how do you properly establish that presence, right? And when the task force looked at it, and I think this is correct, they kind of looked at it from like a general patrol / traffic versus like crime suppression, right? So you could specify what kind of service specifically you're looking for and maybe what you don't want to have. So if the goal is crime suppression, you might hire, investigators or different types of officers than you would if you were performing traffic services, if that makes sense. So I think there's some latitude in there to kind of scope that, but I don't think it would be limited to just what the Alaska State Troopers might be willing to do. I mean, obviously, I think that would be fair if you were actually evaluating that to have a discussion and evaluate that, but I don't think it precludes you from having Wasilla or Palmer PD if they were willing.
I think the
Thank
other,
you.
I think the other thing is, do you want them just drive the neighborhood, or do they check for break-ins, or do they check for traffic? I mean, there's a variety of services, and of course, with each one is a dollar sign. And so did you have further follow-up? Mr. Attorney, do you have?
No, that was the purpose of the report tonight, was at the request of Assemblymember Hale, to let the assembly know, and the mayor and the public, that the framework to set up a new service area, no matter what kind of service area it is, the framework to do that already exists in Borough Code. And certainly, assembly members can give me a call. I can't give legal advice to the members of the public, but I can certainly point you to where it is in the code. And I know the clerk assists people. It would be a lot of mapping, some tax records, that type of stuff that the manager gathers up. So the purpose was to make everybody aware that the mechanism to start the process is already in code if somebody wants to start the process.
Okay.
So that's the end of that part. So the next part of my report tonight is to talk about the vacancy way down there at the end of the table, the dais. So the seat is vacant as of today, as of, I guess, 11:59 last night, 10 days past the first full moon in January. And the state law merely says that you have 30 days to appoint someone to fill the vacancy. The appointment runs until the next regular election, which will be November. Then the person who gets elected in November serves until the end of the term, which is the following November. It's just because of the way the terms have broken down in this particular circumstance. So the task for the assembly at hand is to select a person to fill the vacancy. I had some unexpected medical issues. I missed the last meeting, but I understand that you direct the clerk to put together a notice and an application and post it on the web, and that's up. And so what we could probably do tonight is maybe defer this conversation to the end of the meeting, but you should really think about how long do you want to leave that up for? And then we should schedule a couple of special meetings. The first special meeting would be to review the applicants, which you can do in executive session, just like when we hired a manager, and way back when hired the clerk, and way back when hired the attorney. You can go into executive session to talk about the candidates, decide who you want to interview, if you want to interview, decide how you want to proceed forward, and then potentially schedule interviews, interview people, vote on who you want to have fill the spot. That's basically how we did it back about a decade ago when former Assembly Member Jim Culver got elected to the State House. We collected applications and followed that very process. Obviously, there's a 6-member body right now. State law says it's a majority of the membership to pass something. So you still need 4 votes because authorized membership is 7. So you still need 4 votes to pass something. 3-3 would be a tie. The mayor can choose to break a tie or could choose not to vote, in which case it would fail. And the mayor retains her veto power. I know the mayor's, not very willy-nilly with her red pen, but just so that everybody's aware, the mayor does retain veto power. The other issue that sometimes comes up is that the mayor is the chair and does preside over meetings. And if those meetings go into executive session, the mayor has the absolute right to attend because she's still the chair of the meeting, even if it's an executive session. Although, again, if you have a majority vote or anything like that, the mayor wouldn't necessarily vote in case of a tie. If there is a veto, it still takes 5 votes to override the veto. That doesn't change because there's a vacancy on the assembly. Those were some issues that came up. I went back and kind of looked back at what we did, and those were some issues that came up 10 years ago. So what I would suggest tonight is you kind of all think about what you might want to do for next steps. We could maybe go through the rest of the meeting, let everybody else leave, and then or whoever wants to stay, of course, can stay. And then we can talk about it at the end to kind of figure out what our next steps should be, because state law directs that we're supposed to get this done within 30 days. So within the next week or two, we should have the first of maybe 1 or 2 special meetings to talk about maybe getting together to review candidates and then set up interviews. And then the clerk and the manager and I, of course, would assist in terms of notifying people and setting up things.
Go ahead, ma'am.
One thing to mention also is, of course, these interviews are done should you want to interview the candidates in a public meeting.
Does the candidate get, I know like when we do the evaluations for the 3 of you, we ask you the question, do you want it to be done publicly or, in executive session? Is that same question asked of the applicants? Or is it?
Not when it comes to their interview, but when you go into executive session to review let's say we get 8 people apply, and you want to go into executive session to review those 8 people to decide who to interview, they're going to get a notice from me, my office, direct advising them of their rights under the Open Meetings Act, and we can work through that. Basically, it's a bit of we're kind of saying it a little wrong when you do the evaluation of us. No one has the right to join executive session except the members of the body.
Right.
So you can go to executive session and talk about me all you want.
Mhm.
What I have the right to do is demand that if you're going to talk about me, that you do it in public.
Right.
That doesn't mean I get to attend the executive session.
Right.
So
Right.
as candidates for the empty seat, they would have that same right. But because our questions are the same for everybody, or at least that's going to be my recommendation, that the assembly, we come up with questions, 3, 4, 6, 8 questions, and that they're the same for everybody, that occur publicly, because that's how we've done it before. We have not asked substantive questions of applicants. That's how we did it when we did the manager search. Again, the prior manager search before that, the clerk before that, and the attorney before that. It's always been a very public process. There is public interest. And so that part has always been public, and I would recommend we stay with that.
Okay, all right. And can I ask the clerk, I'm going to ask the clerk a question. You put an ad in the paper, right? Was there a statement there that applicants had to be submitted by a certain time, or?
What I have out there right now, Madam Mayor, is open till filled because I
Okay.
didn't know what date the assembly wanted.
Okay.
And I knew people were going to ask when it's going to close, and my answer would be, I don't know. So I just put open till filled at this point.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So, all right. So is everybody, do you want to discuss anything more, or do you want to wait till the end of the meeting, or?
Can we discuss the timeline again, just for that seat? So it's 30 days, right? And my understanding is one application got turned in a day. Is there any others? Or,
That is the only application I'm aware of.
okay, so we
I was
should,
down here with though.
we'll start taking that up at the next meeting, or we should have special meeting? Or,
The assembly should hold a special meeting to review the application.
So the assembly could say, okay, change the ad and have all of the the applications will close, say, in 2 weeks from tonight or something, or a week from tonight or something like that. That's what you guys could decide. So I think Assemblyperson Nowers.
I was just looking at the timeline. So we have to have that seat filled by February 17th. I always like to err on giving people as much chance as possible to apply. So I just looked at if we closed applications on February 3rd, so that gives a couple more weeks, and then we schedule a special meeting to do interviews and a vote on February 10th, that still gives us a week before we have to fill that seat. Something like that makes sense?
Okay. Assemblyperson Hale, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just looking at tonight's agenda, and we have no introductions for next week. So we could possibly schedule a special meeting prior to next week's meeting, or maybe even after. Generally, it's not a good idea to schedule for after the meeting, but we don't have any introductions. So next week not next week, but next regularly scheduled meeting would be a good time to perhaps select the candidates we want to interview, and then have a special meeting to interview them within a couple of days of that, and move forward from there. Just an idea I had.
So February 7th, then, right, is our next meeting, right? So then, do you agree with the February 3rd end, or you want it a couple days before that, or?
This is just kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but I will be on the North Slope by then. It's difficult for me to make meetings that occur between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. when I am currently on shift. So just a consideration. I'll be at the meeting, whatever happens, whatever we decide, but.
Can I ask you, sir, when you go back?
I leave on Monday.
Oh, this coming Monday?
Yeah, and I'll be
Okay.
back March 6th.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yes, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
So is the public informed about the candidates that have submitted, or they do, so they know everybody all the way all along? Just like.
Go ahead.
To the mayor. When we create that packet for that special meeting, when you start looking at the candidates, I'll attach all those applications that have been turned in to the packet online.
Yeah.
I won't necessarily list all their names out on the agenda, but their names will be
Yeah.
attached with their
Great.
application.
Thanks.
Okay, Assemblyperson Nowers?
Just a question for the clerk. If we did close applications February 3rd, would that give you enough time, turnaround time to pull that together and have it out to us so we can even think about it maybe before the meeting, or at least at the meeting, February 7th?
Yes, we could actually close it on the 6th should you choose, and just add applications if they come in. It's up to the assembly. So what I have right now, and I just want to make sure I'm correct. So special meeting on 2/7, I'm assuming at 4 p.m. And I think to discuss and choose the candidates, probably should talk about the interview questions you may want to ask too. And administration could come forward with some suggested questions. And then I'm assuming you'd like to interview the following week, Tuesday, the 14th at 6 p.m.
Good, since we don't have a lot of, or it doesn't look like right now that the February 7th agenda is very full. And in order to accommodate our slope worker, could we just start the meeting at 6 like regular time and we'd have time during the regular session or
Sure.
regular agenda?
What we could do is
Because
we
4
could,
o'clock you would probably not be available, right, sir?
I could make a 4 o'clock if necessary.
Okay, all right, okay, all right, no problem then, whatever. Just wanted to try to accommodate.
I mean, a 6 o'clock would be better, but I could make
Okay.
a 4 o'clock.
All right. Yes, go ahead, sir.
I'd like to see February 6th as a closing. Give us as much time as possible.
Okay. So
To,
closing on February
for applicants.
6th, then other than the 3rd, but still have it at the meeting of the 7th.
That's correct.
And your preferred time for the meeting on the 7th?
I've got 4 PM.
Okay. Discussion about that, Mr. Attorney?
So not about that.
Oh,
Closing on the 6th is fine. We'll just have to make sure my office will call everybody. And if anybody applies on the 6th, we'll just have to call them about their Open Meetings Act notice. Usually we like to put it in writing, but we'll just call, so that's fine. The only issue I wanted to bring up, I haven't previously informed the assembly of this. I was going to do this tonight. I'll be out of the office from the 2 weeks in February, from the 12th, the week of the 13th and the week of the 20th. My parents are funding my grandkids' trip to Disneyland, and I need to chaperone. So, so I won't be here the week of the 14th. You certainly can do this without me. If you'd like me here, then I would suggest interviews on the 9th or the 10th, as I think Assemblymember Nowers had previously proposed.
We could do it. You can discuss the candidates on the 7th and do the interviews on Thursday, the 9th, should the assembly choose to do that before the attorney leaves. So February 9th at 6 PM? Okay.
okay. So that will be a special meeting for everybody. February 9th, that will be a Thursday. So you'll have 2 meetings that week then. Okay. Well, 3 really. I guess you'll have one at 4, one at 6 on the 7th, and then one on the 9th at 6. Okay. Does that agree with
Got it.
your interpretation?
Yep.
Okay. I guess we ended up discussing it. Is there anything further? And I guess get the questions and I don't know, are there questions that you had before? Are they
I don't,
appropriate or we need to come up with new ones or?
so again, there are no rules on this. You know, the clerk and I will certainly assist, and I know management can too, in terms of coming up with questions. In looking at, again, what we did last time, because why reinvent the wheel? I think it was about 6 questions. So it was maybe 7, maybe it was 1, 6, it was 6, 1 each. Maybe 7 if the mayor wanted to jump in with a last question. And that's what we did, is we went across and everybody just asked a question. Because you're going to give the candidate a time to maybe give an little opening statement about why they want to be an assembly member, and then ask some questions and have a little talk. More than that, it starts to really get long, according to our discussions last time. And I think that actually was the case. So we'll come up with some questions. Obviously, if somebody has questions, if you want to email them to me, I would ask that we do that in advance so that we can be prepared to talk about them on 4 o'clock on the 7th. I would like to know what the questions are beforehand, because I want to make sure that we don't run into things that you cannot ask. We're going to follow kind of HR rules with these questions, whether that's legally the box we have to be in or not. It is a safe place to be, to not talk about things like prohibited classifications and things of that nature. So if you have questions that we want to know.
And every candidate gets asked the same questions, correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Assemblyperson McKee.
Is there a background check of any sort done to who does that? Do we do that? How do we tell if it's not Jack the Ripper or something? I mean, seriously. How do we?
There is a portion of the application that's in Borough Code. They have to either mark yes or no if they've had a felony, or what is the other one, Nick?
A judgment, a
Judgment
money
in the
judgment against
last
them within
10
the 10
years.
years.
Do we go out and look to see if they're being honest? No, we don't.
Yikes. I'm thinking George Santos, but oh well.
There's nothing wrong with you once you have their names to look them up in social media.
It's just like when you run for office. Nobody does a background check. Maybe your opponent.
Okay, any further discussion on the vacancy then? Everybody got the meetings down and everybody's, okay? Alrighty. Yeah, okay, anything further, Mr. Attorney, or questions to the attorney?
Other
Okay,
than
I
I will
guess-
be out for 2 weeks in February. That's it.
Okay. Yep, okay. Alrighty, so Madam Clerk, do you have a report?
The clerk's report's in your red folder with the upcoming meetings scheduled. And please, assembly members, if you guys have questions, please, about the elections, please feel free to come in and see me. It's so much easier if I can show you what the ballot accountability report does rather than trying to explain it without all of the information in front of you. It's hard. It's easier to understand.
Okay, questions to the clerk? Oh, okay. And let's see, there are no citizens or other correspondence. Madam Clerk, would you read the IMs, please?
I am 23015, informing the assembly of the manager's signature on amendment number 2 for the time extension only to operate collection sites and dispose of dead / from beetle-killed trees for Matsu residents.
Are there any comments on the IM? Hearing none, they are presented. We do not have any persons to be heard. Madam Clerk?
Ordinance 23001, an ordinance directing the tax account 117N02 E23D022 be included in the 2023 real property tax foreclosure action. If you're on the phone, would like to speak to this, press *3.
Sir, do we have a staff report or? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Mrs. Mayor, Assembly members, this is brought forward, it's sponsored by Assemblymember Hale. Borough Code currently contains a provision that says if there's known contamination on a property, that the borough does not institute foreclosure processes against those properties. From time to time, properties are foreclosed on that meet the criteria. But if we discover that, what happens is we stop the foreclosure process, even if it's midway through. So this particular piece of property is in the Butte. If you're familiar with the area, it's on the Old Glen Highway where the blinking light is there. If you take a right, one property in is something that the residents and neighborhood have always called the compound. It was the subject of code enforcement action, subject of community cleanup. We filed an injunction against the landowner who actually did file eviction and get some people evicted who were living there. He was claiming they were squatters. In the past few years, and this is all laid out in the IM, by the way, in the past few years, the structure that was on the property has since burned down. The community has made significant progress in cleanup, and the contamination that exists on the property is reflected in the DEC letter that's contained in the IM. DEC wrote a letter back when this was all a big issue. I believe it was 2018, 2019 timeframe, basically saying, there were junk cars there and they may have spilled, material onto the ground, and you need to clean that up. So Assemblymember Hale was exploring with us, what we could do in terms of enforcement. And this was a property that we actually started foreclosure processes on a while ago, but we stopped because of that code provision. And the choice for the assembly tonight is it's potentially a risk factor, right? There could be contamination there. In the eyes of the sponsor, it's worth it because it's probably not that bad to move forward with foreclosure. This property hasn't paid taxes in a very long time. Approximately half of the assessed value is now owed in taxes. And to put this all in context, when we filed the lawsuit against him, he never answered the complaint. So nobody ever showed up to defend the lawsuit for $1,000 a day. There are some liens on the property as well. There's IRS liens. Is also contained in the IM. There's a couple of liens apparently it was used for collateral for an excavator. There was a judgment lien. There's IRS tax liens, one of which is $2 million. And then he owes the borough $257,000 as a result of the code enforcement case. So again, what's happened in the past several years is while he was successful in evicting the people off his property, he never did any cleanup, didn't do anything, continues to not pay his taxes, continues to not clean up, is in, from where we can tell, South Dakota. This is the property owner. And we had a very hard time serving him with the initial lawsuit. And what this ordinance would do is basically say, notwithstanding that general provision of borough code, go forward with the foreclosure. And we would move forward. We would pick up the prior foreclosure from where it was and keep moving forward. That would potentially result in the borough taking deed to the property, at which time the borough could decide to dedicate it to a public purpose or sell it. We would also, if we take deed to the property, have to deal with potentially dealing with some of these liens if we decided we wanted to try to keep it. Nonetheless, it would move forward with enforcement against the property, and it's really a tax account where it's now, tens of thousands of dollars worth of delinquencies that this person is simply not paying taxes on. The property is assessed at $42,000, and the tax bill is over $21,700. So just about half. And I'll defer to the sponsor if there's more to add, but that is the general staff report.
Deputy Mayor?
I should probably go after Tim or.
I will hold my comments until after the public hearing. So if you have questions.
Okay. Alrighty, I will go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 23-001. I don't think we have a sign-up sheet, but if there is anyone here that would like to speak regarding this ordinance to the assembly, you're welcome to come forth at this time. Don't see anybody here. Do we have anybody online? We do not have anybody online. Okay. One last time for anyone here on this ordinance? No. Go ahead and close the public hearing. Assembly Person Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to adopt ordinance 23-001, and I'd like to speak to it if I could.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one thing that I would correct the attorney on is it wasn't the landowner that you had the folks evicted. It was the community. It was the Butte community. We contacted the landowner's lawyer, and the lawyer was able to secure a power of attorney that the community used to go to the court and get the eviction notice and the writ of assistance. So this particular landowner, this is the Bodenberg compound. This particular landowner refused to do anything about these squatters, these criminal elements. They were, it was open air market there. They were selling drugs. They were stealing cars, taking them there, parting them out, taking the catalytic converters, whatever. And there was nothing that could be done about it by either, well, we couldn't get the landowner to do anything about it, and the borough did not have the power to do anything about it because it was in private hands. And so the community came together and they got the people evicted, and I got some money. The assembly gave them some money at my request, and they have done an incredible job of cleaning up. They still have some cleanup funds left, I believe, and they're intending to use those all up. But the reason that the borough couldn't do anything about it is because they couldn't foreclose on the property because of this. If there's a possibility or a reasonable possibility of contamination on site, the borough does not foreclose. And so what I would like to do is get this foreclosed on, get it out of this bad actor's hand, and dedicate it to a public purpose. And whether we then transfer the property over to this community group that did all the work of trying to get these squatters out and the place cleaned up, or whether the borough does something with it ourselves, I think that, it would be an excellent place for a public purpose such as a park, a skate rink. I mean, I don't know, something cool that the Butte community can look at and say, we did that. This was a bunch of criminals and bad elements, and we got them out, and we turned it into this beautiful, whatever, park, skate rink, whatever. So that's kind of the purpose of bringing this forward. The contamination there is surface contamination from, antifreeze and oil, motor oil spilling out on the ground. It's not like there was and there's probably like human feces and, needles, hypodermic needles and things of that nature that we found out there. But it's not like this was a waste disposal site or like a gas station or something where you're going to have real deep rooted, far spreading contamination that's going to cost a lot of money to clean up. So.
Okay, Assemblyperson Veneer, go ahead.
I support Tim in this ordinance. I do not support him in holding on to the property as a park or, and the reason being, any other property, fine, but if you got a $2 million IRS lien on it, I don't think the borough should hang on to that. I know my neighbor, he's got 23, 24 properties. He always goes down, the borough buys them. Tons of them have IRS liens. He tells me, Ron, they fall off in 7 years. I don't know how the IRS would, if the borough owned it, if it would look differently in the IRS's eyes. Wait, they got money. Most people don't have, a civilian might be able to skate away better. And then the fact that if we could get it back into private hands to where it would be a taxable income coming in eventually at some point, they built on it or.
Okay. Assemblyperson McKee?
I thought that $2 million lien went away if we went through this process. Does it not?
Let's let the attorney.
No, so foreclosures, in the state of Alaska, foreclosures wipe out all liens except prior recorded tax liens.
Oh, sorry.
The issue about the lien and the IRS and what might happen with that would be a future discussion. We would have to go forward with the foreclosure process because, again, as noted in the IM, I will point out to everybody, this would be a tax foreclosure. If he gets notice of the tax foreclosure and somebody miraculously shows up and pays the property taxes, we're done. We're not proceeding any further because that's all you can do with the tax foreclosure. But we will pursue forward, with the tax foreclosure if directed to do so by the assembly. Any future decisions about what to do with the property would be, we'd have to work through that later.
Assemblyperson Hale?
Yeah, so the tax lien, the IRS tax lien was a big concern of mine. And correct me if I misunderstood what you had described, the process you had described to me, Mr. Attorney, but if we dedicate it to a public purpose, the IRS is much more likely to forgive the tax lien at that point. So that's kind of the whole idea of dedicating it to a public purpose, or like I say, transferring it into the hands of the community group out there who did the cleanup. Either one of those options is fine. Either way would be great. But once we dedicate it to a public purpose, getting the IRS off our backs is a whole lot easier, just to address that point specifically.
And while we would never be able to guarantee anything,
Right.
my office would certainly contact the IRS and say, look, this was a tax foreclosure. We're going to make this thing into a park. Can you, look somewhere else for your liens against this person and start to pursue that.
Have we had any experience in the borough of achieving such an action?
No,
Okay,
we've never asked.
okay.
We've never, this is, some of this more code enforcement and cleanup and really turning properties around, it's been a priority and we've been leaning into things pretty hard. This will be the first time we're going to do something like this potentially. So
Have we had any history of having any property in the borough on the tax foreclosure sale that have had IRS liens on them?
we have individuals buy properties all the time that have IRS liens on them.
Okay,
And they take them subject to those IRS liens.
okay,
Yeah, they
okay.
survive.
I don't know, I have a couple of staff
Yeah,
people here, so.
and I'll defer to them. What I don't know is, and certainly not through my office, whether we have retained any properties with big IRS liens on them and dealt with the IRS over that. have not personally had that experience in dealing with
Does-
those.
Anybody on the assembly have any objection to letting the staff come forth and addressing questions? Okay. Come, sir. Thank you.
Eric Phillips, Community Development Director, through the mayor. I can tell you that we have a number of properties over the years since I've been here that have had IRS tax liens. And like Nick said, they usually do not slow the property down from being sold to private citizens. They're able to cure that fairly easily. And I believe in talking to our tax foreclosure specialists, the borough itself has been able to cure the tax liens when it has come into the borough's ownership as well.
From IRS?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Does anybody else have questions of staff before I release them? No? Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. Further discussion by the assembly? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
First off, great job. I know you've spent a lot of time on this and we gave you some money, I think last year or something for the cleanup. So I fully support you on this. My question is this, and I just don't understand the process very well. So that's why I'm asking. So we move forward in this, the borough's taking it back. Does it go to courthouse steps? Can somebody from anywhere go and buy this before we take it back? I mean, how does that work? Or
So foreclosure process is, it's like all the other foreclosures we do. So in this particular case, this one started in the 2018 foreclosures. It was then pulled out of the 2018 foreclosures because we realized what it was and that there was this letter from DEC in the file. So we have judgment to this property. What we'll do is we'll publish notification. I'll task Mr. Ashenbrenner tomorrow to get with the bankruptcy foreclosure technician. Well, the next steps are to publish notification and try and serve the individual personally, then go to the court and ask for clerk's deed. The court will issue deed to the borough in the borough's name. And at that point, it becomes up to the assembly on what to do with the property. So there's no, unless the assembly decides to sell it, there is no chance for someone individual other than the record owner, Mr. Henry, showing up and paying the taxes. That's the only way.
thank you.
Further questions? Yes. assembly
Yeah, just
person,
a quick clarification. Mr. Henry doesn't have to show up to pay the taxes.
No, somebody
Just
on
the
his behalf.
taxes have to be paid.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be him.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay. Is there any objection to the motion passing? Okay, hearing no objection, then the legislation passes. Clerk?
Ordinance 23004, an ordinance accepting and appropriating an additional $5,394.14 from the Alaska State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management Grant Program for equipment with accompanying resolution 233, a resolution approving the revised budget for the State of Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management Grant for equipment.
Okay, we do have a staff report. Aye.
Through the mayor to the assembly, Cheyenne Heinel, Finance Director. Before you is an accept and appropriate of additional funding on a State of Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management Grant. This grant was originally awarded to the borough to provide for training for staff and also to provide for essentially a drone. This additional money will help with the purchase of the equipment.
Okay, questions of staff? Don't see any. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 23-004 and resolution 23-003. Is there anyone here that we do not have a sign-up sheet? Nope. Anyone here that, yes, come forth, sir.
Lloyd Thurman, Big Lake. As I understood, it's for a drone purchase. Is that correct?
Is it for, I'm sorry, for what?
If I understood, is that for a drone? As kind of a precaution for other people of which I don't have a vested interest or whatever in this, but, you know, it used to be typically that you could only be able to look from midsection of the road into properties if they didn't like what you had. At this, we're going to be able to, this portion, are they going to be surveilling everything that you have on your property from there? Now we're getting at a genuine situation of security and privacy that we're talking about right now, not just a couple of numbers on a ballot. I mean, we're talking about being able to survey you in every single way. So to me, there's a little bit of a issue involved. And that's just a comment that I have to make in relation to it. Somebody else brought up, I believe, that we're almost into a surveillance state. How much more? It's beginning to be a little bit crazy after a little while. So that's just a point of concern. We're really beginning to get a problem here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to address the assembly on this ordinance and resolution? Okay. So do we have anybody online? No. Okay. So I'll go ahead and close the public hearing then. And Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 23004 and resolution 23003. And if I may, I'd like to ask, I was going to ask the manager just kind of what the intended use of this drone was going to be, or anybody that he sees fit to.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember Young. The borough has drones already. These drones that are used by emergency management are utilized primarily in disaster situations, fires, flooding. That's what they're being used for. They're not being used to surveil individual properties.
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion? Is there any objection to this legislation? Okay, seeing none, then the legislation passes. We are now to audience participation, and we do have some people signed up. Okay, DJ McBride.
Good evening. I'm DJ McBride, chairperson of RSA 15 Caswell Lakes Road Board, and in support of the RSA 15 resolution 01-23 that's in your packet, I would like to ask $25,000 in funding for development of a material storage area be returned to our RIP list. RSA 15 stretches 22 miles along Parks Highway from mile 73 to mile 95 at Montana Creek Road and contains the largest subdivision in the state. It has 77 miles of road, of which 1.5 are paved and 2.5 are chip sealed, and the balance is gravel. At the end of this year, due to 2 large road projects, we will have 7.4 miles of pavement and 1.5 miles of chip seal in our inventory, thus necessitating the need for more sand and gravel to ensure safe travel on our roads. The current storage facility for sand and gravel is in Big Lake. This means that when sand or gravel is needed for the roads, it usually takes at least 1.5 hours for one load of sand or gravel to reach where it's needed, and that's only for one load. Each subsequent load would take longer because the sander would need to return to Big Lake and then drive back to the RSA to spread its load. This is not only inefficient and expensive, but it also makes for unsafe conditions for the residents as they try to make their way to work and school when the roads are icy. This board has been working on this material storage yard for about 4 years now. And at this point, there is a borough-owned dedicated piece of land in the heart of the RSA for this purpose. The lot has good ground and underlying materials, so development costs would be minimal. Power lines are located within 1,000 feet of the lot and could be brought in later if needed. The board's plan for this project is to have the property surveyed this year and start clearing off the trees, with an eye to dedicating another $25,000 in our next RIP list to finish clearing the trees and clear off the overburden. So there is a plan, but the funding needs to go through with the plan. And therefore, I respectfully request that the funding for this material storage area please be returned to the RSA 15's RIP list so this much needed project can go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
How many loads of sand have you received so far this winter?
This winter, I could not tell you off the top of my head, but I could get that number for you if you'd like, sir.
Yeah, would that be not 1, 2, 20?
At least 5. We have had probably much more than that. I would have to ask our superintendent.
Okay, and you got those out of Big Lake?
Out of Big Lake. Everything comes out of Big Lake. There is no yard nearer.
That's the closest sand and chip pile?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's
you
where
aware
our
of
sand
the-
and chips are located. It's on McKenna Brothers property.
Are you aware of the sand and chip pile that's stockpiled and has been for years in Willow at the transfer station? Apparently not.
It might be, and it would still take just as long.
But what's half the miles? Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sean McBride?
Hello, my name's Sean McBride, and I'm also a resident of RSA 15. I'm going to speak on the sand and material storage area. Like you just heard, the borough already owns this property. It's been set aside for a material storage yard. The $25,000 would allow the clearing to be done, surveying to be done, and get a start on this. Right now, the RSA 15 does not really have a town in it. We've got Willow south of us, we got Talkeetna north of us. So our current contractor is based in Big Lake. Previous contractor was based, at least, I think he had a temporary yard in Willow. The contractor before that had a yard in Willow. So everything, materials, equipment, all has to come some distance to get to us. If the borough had a yard in the middle of the RSA, that would allow the contractor and the borough to store materials and station equipment in the RSA instead of having to transport it from far outside. That would increase safety, and it would probably be a cost savings for the contractor, which might show up in the next bid if this was available when the next contract comes to bid. The other thing that could happen is by having a storage yard, if there's any large projects going on, either privately or the state or the borough, excess materials could be stored there rather than having a contractor mob them dozens of miles to Wasilla or Palmer or wherever their yard might be. It would be cheaper for them to leave them on site with us that we could use for other projects. In the long run, I think this would save the borough some money. Thanks.
Mhm. Sure.
Are you aware of the gravel pit that the borough owns in Talkeetna?
No, I'm not.
Are you aware of the gravel pit in Trapper Creek? And the borough actually sells material out of there?
No, I'm not. I don't
Okay,
know
thank
exactly
you.
where those are.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
How much extra material you're expecting off these road projects?
Well, just in my experience, I used to work for the municipality of Anchorage, specifically in Chugiak Eagle River. And we used to get a lot of material, specifically rotomillings, because the state would rotomill the Glen Highway and they didn't want to haul it all the way to Anchorage. They would either give it to us or sell it to us for a fraction of the cost. And then we could turn around and use those materials in the Chugiak Eagle River area. Saved us a ton of money. We've had other contractors, like even somebody putting in a large subdivision, they'd end up with 4 extra catch basins. They didn't have a use for them. Rather than haul them someplace, they'd just give them to us because we had a storage yard. We could turn around and use that material for city projects.
Would we still be getting charged for the material?
It would depend. Say for instance, right now the state's doing bridge projects on Sheep Creek, Grays Creek, and up by Montana Creek. Say when they go to pave that, they bring in X amount of tons of D1 material and they have 4 truckloads left. Do they want to haul that all the way to someplace else? Or if we said, hey, we've got a yard 2 miles around the corner, well, 4 miles around the corner, why don't you just drop it there? Considering what trucking costs are, a lot of people are like, we'll just leave it here. You guys can have it. I've seen that happen before. Like I said, specifically my experience in Chugiak Eagle River. So it doesn't always happen, but it could. but it can't happen without this yard. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Pat Daniels?
Hello, Madam Mayor, Assembly, and staff. My name is Pat Daniels. Tonight I'm here on behalf of Big Lake RSA Board. As the primary of a 5-person road board, I wish to submit the following resolution with our unanimous vote. Resolution 23-01, a resolution of Big Lake Road Service Area 21, RSA 21, asking the Assembly and the Borough Manager to request the State of Alaska Department of Transportation, DOT, to prioritize rerouting Lucille Creek wetlands with the Big Lake Road and Hollywood Road resurfacing to follow. Whereas the State of Alaska requested public comments by November 7th, 2022 on that proposal to begin engineering and environmental studies to resurface Big Lake Road and Hollywood Road along with addressing Lucille Creek wetlands and drainage. And whereas RSA 21 has serious ongoing road issues where Lucille Creek drainage has been rerouted due to ATV tracks, damaged levees, and natural debris, resulting in flooding onto RSA 21 private properties and roads, including Cherrywood, Clatina, and Hollywood Road. And whereas RSA 21 Board of Supervisors has recommended that the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Public Works Department begin design of Hollywood Road drainage alternative in October 2007 hydrological assessment report to reroute drainage from Cherrywood, Katina, Hollywood Road to Jordan Lake and on to Big Lake. And now, therefore, it be resolved that the RSA 21 Board, that the RSA 21 Big Lake Board of Supervisors recommends that the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Assembly and the Borough Manager request the State of Alaska DOT to prioritize its engineering and environmental studies to 1. First, rechannel the Lucille Creek floodplain to its previous route to drain primarily under Big Lake Road near Nanana to reduce flooding along Cherrywood, Clatina, and Hollywood. 2, then resurface Big Lake Road through the roundabout. 3, work with the Borough Public Works Department to coordinate a design and construction of new drainage along Hollywood Road from Katina to Jordan Lake, since a culvert under Big Lake Road will be needed. 4, then resurface Hollywood Road and Big Lake Road from the roundabout to the Big Lake Elementary School. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Tim?
Hi, everyone. Mayor and Assembly, my name is Tam Bovee. I'm a member of the Caswell RSA 15 Advisory Board, and I'm here to speak to AM 22-155. Approval of the road service area road improvement project list. One of the items approved by our board, $25,000 for sand pile storage development, was cut from that list at the December Assembly meeting. It was extremely frustrating listening to the Assembly debate this item. Clearly, there's a lack of understanding about how rural road service areas operate and the challenges that arise when we need materials that are being stored at a contractor's yard an hour or more away. It's a big borough, I get that. It's hard to know everything about every community, but that's one of the reasons why these road boards are so important. They understand the local issues and they can advise the Assembly on local needs. And sand and chip storage is a need. This is a safety issue. When we have freezing rain, we cannot afford to wait hours to get traction material on our roads. Road conditions can mean the difference between life and death, with on-call responders in the nearest hospital an hour and a half away. The traction materials we need for Caswell are currently being stored at our contractor's yard in Big Lake, an hour away when roads are good, longer when they're not. Fortunately for us, we have an excellent contractor, McKenna Brothers, but contractors do change, and so do the locations of their yards. This has been a topic of discussion at many road service area board meetings held at the local Caswell Fire Station, and regularly attended by a dozen or more local residents, people who've lived in the area for years, people who know the roads, people who know the road contractors. We have one of the leanest budgets in the entire borough. We take our RIP list very seriously, and we've been trying to address the sand and chip storage issue for several years now. We've acquired the land necessary, and now we need to survey and start clearing. This will be a no-frills project, but a very necessary one. So we placed the item on our RIP list yet again, and we asked our assembly representative to speak on behalf of the Caswell community, but obviously he failed to bring our concerns forward. So here we are, asking you to allow us to spend our money on our roads. This is the only RIP list item we're asking for this year. Please allow us to move forward with our sand and chip storage yard. Thank you.
Cecilia? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How much sand have you guys used this season?
I believe you asked DJ that. I do not know the exact amount, and I know the season is only half over.
Have you used any?
Pardon?
Have you used any sand?
Personally, I don't deliver
for
sand.
the RSA. Has the RSA had McKenna Brothers sand?
I know there has been an ongoing need. I know especially with the strange weather patterns of late, we've had a lot more ice issues than normal. So there is a need.
Do you have sand in your contract?
I believe that if sand is needed, it will be brought in. It has been brought in historically. The contract will have to be reviewed in light of the increased number of road miles that will be paved. Asking for this to be stored nearer is not an overreach. This will be a several-year project. We're not looking to complete it this year. Did we or did we not ask you for this item?
Yes. And there's no sand or end chip in anybody's contract north of Willow. So.
But there will be in contracts going forward. That is my understanding.
I was actually talking to Tom Adams, and I was trying to get some answers from him and ran short today. And I would like to actually move this, once it's opened up, to postpone it and get some good answers, and that way we can make good fiscal decisions.
Okay, well, it's already been decided, so postponing seems unnecessary. I do wish that the assembly would seriously look at the RIP lists and either speak to the board members on the road board or ask questions prior to approving these lists.
I don't think it's fiscally responsible. It will be needed eventually, possibility, depending on temperatures and stuff. But what I was told, that they do not require sand and chips because of temperatures north of Willow.
Have you attended the meetings
Okay,
where we've discussed
I'm going to
this?
go ahead and close this off because this item is not on the agenda.
Agreed.
So there is no discussion that the assembly can make at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, Cecilia?
Thank you, everybody, for hearing me again. I'm Cecilia, and I am here about the problem in our area of code enforcement. But the code enforcement people have been doing a good job. I listened to what happened to you. I nearly started bawling. I don't want our situation to get like yours was. It's disgusting. The last part of the Pledge of Allegiance is liberty and justice for all. We need to put the lady who owns that property into place. And I can't do it, but you guys can. I know you can. You guys are awesome. You deal with so many different things, but I'm having to put up with horrific ugliness. I mean, everything he said is what's going on next door to us, other than the owner is there with her felony children who are in their late 30s and 40s with their buddies, and it's getting worse and worse every single day. That big, heavy snowfall, a nurse lived across the street. They moved out. They couldn't hack it anymore. They have so much people in the cul-de-sac and cars. She couldn't get out. She had to walk, which is about a quarter of a mile in that heavy snow to get to work because couldn't get anybody to move the cars out of their driveway. I mean, it's ridiculous. We do have other calls into other places too, trying to get help, but it has to, I believe, start here with the borough, because you guys have the law. No more than 3 cars. Garbage, 30 days. Let's get into the years. I've been there 29 years. I've never seen them, whatever. It's disgusting. And I mean, please don't let it get like his. I mean, it's already pretty much, other than the owner is still there. She gets behind all the time, but they're making a lot of money now, let me tell you. They're making money. They're laughing at us. They're laughing at you guys too. And they're laughing at the police. They're laughing at the EMTs. They're laughing at everybody who has to keep doing and not getting paid for it. Liberty and justice for all. One day they will have their day. Until then, I'm going to keep coming here and pleading. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you all. I know you go through a lot. God bless you. Thank you.
Can I ask her a question?
Sure. We're being pretty relaxed tonight,
Point of
so.
order.
Okay.
Yeah.
Point of order on
I
the
just wanted to tell
questions.
you, when I heard it was, I didn't know what area, Tim, whether you were in Tim's area, I was thinking, oh, thank God, these people, I was gonna jump over there and say, bless you. But it's not you. So how come it isn't you? How come we're still having this problem? What
Okay.
can we do?
Okay, we need to stay with audience participation. We've been
I was
pretty relaxed.
participating with her, but
Yeah.
oh well.
Yeah.
Talk to me. What can we do?
Tom.
I'm Tom Wistoff. Hey folks, how you doing? The weekend of Christmas, there was another car on fire out in the cul-de-sac. And it sat there for the whole weekend. And then I finally called Matt and he came out to look at it and tag it, I guess. But it was gone because they drug it up on their property. I bet dollars for donuts, but they said their friend towed it off. And since the last time I was here again, we counted 7 vehicles, but we don't see them all. We just, if we're in our kitchen and we look out the window, oh, there goes another one. But most of it occurs at night when we're in bed. You can hear their slide bed going and stuff. And I know 4 or 5 weeks ago, Matt said that it went to the borough attorney's office. And I was wondering, is there any response, or can I come in and set up a meeting with you and talk about it, or? Because I know last time we were here, Edna, you asked me after the meeting, what was my suggestion? And my suggestion would be to send them an injunction and tell them to cease and desist and start cleaning up their property with their own money, because they've got it. and give them so much time. And if it's not cleaned up, start adding the fines up and just tell them you will acquire this much fine every time till you get this stuff done. And when Matt was out there last time, they said, well, I'm starting a salvage yard, is what he told Matt. And I'm like, oh no. And Matt says, well, you can't just start a salvage yard. And I don't know, I'm trying to find out earlier today what they have to do that. And I guess all they really need to do is get a permit. And who's ever in charge of these permits and stuff, I don't want these people to get a darn salvage yard license. They already got like close to 100 vehicles, and you don't have a salvage yard and stack them 2 and 3 vehicles high on the property line either, which is what they're doing. And there is a lot of water around there. And I'm thinking same thing. That's what I was saying this summer. We're going to call the EPA because this stuff's got to leak into this water, and they've got vehicles sitting in this much water. And they've just been moving around in the wintertime, so they can't see it yet. But yeah, something has to be done because these people are they're totally lawless people. They laugh because the law doesn't do anything to them. They go to jail, they get out the next day and they're back at it. So, I mean, it's the only people that can do anything is y'all up here. And I pray to God you start acting and getting something done about these people, because they just keep bringing in more and adding to it every day. It's horrible. Yeah. Thank you very much. And we do appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. So, pardon? Down mile 9, I think it is on KGB.
Close to
KGB
Reddington,
and mile 11.
Reddington School.
Yeah, okay. Lloyd?
Lloyd Thurman, Big Lake. I wanted to continue on with the previous meeting that we had where I wasn't allowed to be able to stand up. So I just wanted to praise y'all for a lot of work. Clerk here ran a real good election and everything else. And, you know, I came and monitored a lot of the things as well. I just talked with her a little bit earlier, and she said, you know, it went, as we said, it went smoother than what we maybe had anticipated that it would. But so it's not that difficult. I want to thank y'all for being able to do this. It begins to bring back to the people a point of trust, you know, that things can't, that we are not just helpless agents at the mercy of bureaucracy of people who are elected, which we're not even sure about how good the elections are, you know, of whether how legitimate, but we do know from the lower 48, and if you've been paying attention to the news and other things, you know that there's a lot of fraud that's going on, and our country is in serious trouble. And if you don't see that, then you really need to start hunting for some of those spurless news networks that are in question as far as whether they're putting out legitimate truth, and then begin to really evaluate with true sincerity. And if you do, then you'll begin to see the fraud that is going on. And that's the reason why our country is in the mess that we are, and edicts are coming down upon us, the people. We've got to begin to get that out of from us, or we have lost our country, and we're very close to that. Wanted to thank you for your comments, Ms. Nowers. I thought your questions that you asked over here to the lady were very astute and very on target. Only problem is I disagree with the comments that she had made, because I know of so many people that have gotten ballots. I know of 8 to 10 people that have received 4 to 5, and they cannot get them off of their own properties and everything else, cannot get them of dead people, and it's going on. It's one thing about having policies, but it's another thing about following those policies that you've made. One of your portions in here is on that we have to have the numbers on the ballots themselves. That's in code. So bottom line is y'all are in violation of the code. There's other ways to be able to handle this thing. I know that we talked about this other. It's with the printers of how they could put them, how you can do the ballots. You could be able to have them flipped over. I know you're having difficulty, but we can work. We have a group that's working on this to be able to come up with ways to be able to do these. Security is not a problem. You know, we have talked about this numerous ways. That seemed to be one of the bigger concerns here, but we know that there are ways, easy ways that we can be able to do this thing concerning security there. And the portion is, if our poll workers are that untrustworthy, then we've really got a problem that we can't trust them at all. So they're, you know, they're going to be scrutinizing and things. I just wanted to say that you already have a group that's already working on these things. You've already said that you're going to continue on with them, you know, and we're very interested in that, but we want to make them as secure so people can have confidence in their heart that, hey, my vote really did count and I don't have to worry about it being robbed. So I guess those are some of the key points. I guess one thing kind of wrap up was a little point that we can really be proud of as Alaskans is we're at least, I've heard different numbers. I've heard 14 and I've heard down the lowest of 8%. We lead the whole nation in bloated voter rolls. We're number one. Hey, but I'm a winner. You know, we're number one. We're more bloated than any other state in the union of over on the voter rolls, more so than even people that we have in the state to vote. So you're very spot on with the portion, you know, and coming from y'all as a group is really great because the legislature doesn't want to move on it. So you've got to push them. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Lloyd. Jackie?
My name's Jackie Goforth. I live in Greater Palmer. And the reason I showed up earlier is because when I see election and special meeting, my trust factor goes to the floor. And I think when you saw all those people here, that's why. We don't trust our elections. But the reason I'm here, and I'm sorry about the micro writing, my Adobe program writes it that little. I need to know the boundary of the original town of Palmer. And the reason why is there is an entity in District 1, and it might go District 2, it might go to District 1. There's a government entity that is now putting out, or has been putting out, an acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement. And they do a land acknowledgement in Anchorage. It's at the beginning of their assembly, and they talk about how the land, they're on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina tribe and others. And we do one with the school district. Matsu School District has one at the end of their, a meeting where they talk about the acknowledgement of the land. Now, I am married to an Indigenous person. I have Indigenous children, and I have an Indigenous granddaughter. My husband is a registered Choctaw, okay? I revere and respect the Indigenous peoples. But we have an entity that says that the town of Palmer sits on the unceded traditional lands. Now, if you look up the definition of unceded, it's got a really bad connotation. It means it wasn't handed over, it's unyielded, there's no treaty, and it wasn't surrendered in war. Now, for anybody who knows their history, in 1971, Nixon signed the Alaska Native Settlement Lands Act that gave over 45 million acres to the Indigenous peoples. They also received $962,500,000, which in today's value is $7,053,508,950.62. There was a lot of money exchanged with 12 tribes, now 13, and 12 corporations, now 13, and over 200 tribes in exchange for lands lost. Lands lost means they were ceded. There is a treaty in existence. Now, I sent a cease and desist to this entity and told them I need the unceded off of there because it's fraudulent. No town in Palmer is not covered under lands lost. It is the palmermuseum.org. The Palmer Museum down in the little town of Palmer is run by a nonprofit foundation. They are funded by the Matsu Health Foundation and by the Rasmussen Foundation. And they have 9 directors for that little building, and they can't seem to take unceded off of their opening page. So if you go to palmermuseum.org right now and you go halfway down, you will see the town of Palmer sits on the traditional unceded lands of the Dena'ina tribe and others. This is fraud, and it looks really bad. If I was a person down in Texas and wanted to come up here to Alaska to visit, I certainly wouldn't go somewhere where they stole the lands from the native tribes. Now, if you think that a lie doesn't matter, it does. A lie, if said enough times, becomes truth to some people. And if you don't believe that, please look at the gender thing. Boys cannot become girls and girls cannot become boys, but you can fight until you're blue in the face with someone who believes that it is true. So I do not want a problem in the future with any of my children or their children or anybody thinking that we are sitting, anybody in Palmer or District 1. I don't know how big the town of Palmer was, the territory of Palmer, before Palmer was incorporated in 1951. But anyone who has a problem with this and can help me, you can be at the Palmer meeting on the 24th, or you can write to cityclerk@palmerak.org and ask that your testimony be written or be read into the record, because I can't seem to get them to take unseated off of that site, and I don't really understand why. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to address the assembly? Do we have anyone online, Caleb? No? Okay. So with that, we'll conclude audience participation. We are at the consent agenda. Madam Clerk?
Resolution 23-5, a resolution approving the scope of work and budget for the Bradley Road Bridge replacement over Trapper Creek, Fund 410, Project 30050-1802, and the Willow Station Road Railroad Crossing Upgrade, Fund 410, Project 30042-1803.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, move the legislation, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda as read into the record by the clerk.
Is there discussion? Any objection? Seeing none, then the consent agenda is approved. And we had 2 hold items,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
First one's AM 23004 to award bid number 23047B to Carlos Tree Service Incorporated in the contract amount of $354,205 to perform clearing at the central landfill. And it was pulled by Assemblymember McKee.
Okay, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead. Will you move the AM first and then address that?
I move AM with AM 23-004.
Okay, now go ahead and address it.
I just had a couple of questions. The first one is, are they now moving, I know they own all the land, but are they moving into Crevasse Marine, the park, or that 4 square mile park area? Will this 40 acres take them in further into the park? Quote unquote park? No? So it's all on land that's already been cleared and it's part of the landfill.
I'm sure I will get corrected if I get it wrong, but my understanding is this will clear the area for the Channel Loop Road project that's going to happen. Will be a new entrance. So that's over by the recycling center and animal control and kind of past there, and then cell 5. So it will not affect the trail system. It might clear some trees that are close to the trail system, but it did not affect the trail system.
Okay.
Did I get it right, manager?
Yeah.
Just state your name.
I'm Alex Senta. I'm the project management division manager overseeing the contract for this work. It's all within the landfill boundaries, not going into the park.
Okay.
And we're actually leaving there's a buffer. I can't remember how big it is. It's 50 or 100 feet or something to that boundary. But we're clearing 18 acres over on that, about 20 acres over on that side. And then another about 12 acres for the road project that we're doing on the alternate access. So
And what do they do with the trees? Is any of that
we
could be sold for firewood or?
We asked for pricing to prepare the logs for firewood permits, but it was an additional to the next bidder up, or we asked for pricing for that and it did not pan out. It didn't pencil out. So we're going to grind them or burn them, whatever the contractor can get approval for, I guess, but they're not planning on selling them or anything for firewood. It costs too much money to prepare that.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, further discussion on AM 23004. Yes, Assemblyperson 2.
Yeah, when you usually do a clearing like that, don't you just leave the wood for the citizens to grab? It's not like you sell it, isn't it? Or did I get in wrong place here?
In the past, on some small road projects, we've done that, but I think by code, especially when you do big areas like this and in a spot where you don't normally have the public, it's not open access, you need to go in, you actually buy a permit, sometimes we can waive that. I'm not sure on all those rules, but we do it. We've done it in the past for some of our schools. Like when we built Reddington, we sold permits for that job. But as far as just letting people go in there and get it where it lays, I don't think that's an option, you know. I mean,
Okay, so we've quit it then.
what's that?
We've quit doing that then.
Yeah, I haven't done it in years.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah, I seen it on Trunk Road, and then I've also seen it when they were clearing out the new highway here. I'm pretty sure that I seen them taking the wood off the side too. So people, come up with their, people with their pickups and chainsaws and start at it.
Okay.
Or along with what Mookie said, guys or people who go out and buy these tracts of land and then go in and cut it off and sell it, and they have a firewood selling business, that wouldn't go? Because they're going in, normally they would go in, cut down the trees, limb them, do whatever they needed to do. So here the trees are already cut down, there's gonna be laying there rotting. Couldn't we make some sort of a provision to allow these small business people to go in there and get that?
We asked for pricing to haul the logs to an easily accessed area and stack them. And to award that service, it was another $80,000 onto our contract.
So the individuals couldn't go in there and get it themselves with the small businesses where they've got dozers and stuff and.
Boy, that's a big question. I think it's no, but I
Could we
guess.
get more information on that?
Sure.
I'd like that.
So the question would
We can't get firewood
be,
right now to heat our house because.
is it possible for the public to just go get the trees where they lay within the landfill boundary?
Yeah, something like that.
I think it's complicated because it's within the landfill.
I don't know.
Okay, Assemblyperson Hale.
Yeah, so on the big state road projects, they set aside extra money to limb every tree over, like, I think it's like 8 inches. They have to limb every tree over 8 inches, and they stack them in the right of way, and anybody can come along and take that wood. But they said the state sets aside extra money in the contract for that service to be provided. So it costs money.
Assemblyperson in here, go ahead.
Isn't it mostly cottonwood in that area?
Yeah, it's mostly big cottonwood, and it's really rough terrain. It's steep hills and things, so it's pretty difficult access.
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, did you want to say something? Did you want to say? Okay.
I just
Yeah,
want to thank
so-
you for your question because that settled it for me. Cottonwood doesn't get it. So yeah, that's like junk wood. Yeah, thanks.
Through the mayor to the assembly, I just wanted to be clear that this contract is not indicative that the borough stopped doing that. Where it's economical and it's safe for the public to access to get, whether they're smaller road project, bigger road projects, it's not that the borough stopped doing that. So I just want to make that clear because I don't want the public to get the impression the borough just decided it was too hard and didn't want to do it anymore. Where it makes sense to do that, but where, obviously if the assembly said, yeah, we want you to do it, we'll pay $80,000 or whatever it might take, right? We included it in the bid, but typically where we'll do that is where it's economical and where it's on public land. Sometimes if we acquire right away and we have to clear it, sometimes the conditions of that agreement with the people that we purchase the property from will be that we leave the timber for them, right? So it just depends is the answer. I know that's not a great answer, but the reality is we still do it. We'll still do it where it makes sense to do that. I just didn't want folks to walk away and say somewhere somebody made a policy decision at the borough to stop doing that. That hasn't happened.
Further discussion on AM 23-004. Any objection to it passing? Okay, seeing none, then it passes. Madam Clerk?
AM 23-005, authorization to extend the final completion date for contract number 22103B with Western Construction Equipment LLC to April 30th, 2023 for right-of-way surveying and clearing services. It was pulled by Assembly Member 2.
To move it, sir, please. and then
I move
address
to
it.
open IM 23-005.
Okay, your concern, sir?
Yeah, I know that last year we started this contract with Western, and it was a new thing that the borough was getting involved in. And I was wondering how did last year go and how is it going? And Are we actually benefiting from having a contractor that's, on staff for 5 years to do this job?
Yeah, so it's a 3-year contract. This contract or this change order would complete the first year's worth of work. So there's 2 more options that we're going to come to you in the spring to ask for. I think it's going good. We've cleared, I think, about a half a dozen projects ahead of utility companies coming and doing their relocates, mostly on smaller jobs. Actually, there's some pretty big ones. And the goal there is to basically get ahead of, typically in the past, what we've done is on any road project, excuse me, is to, during design phases, before it's bid, we make agreements with the utility companies to get their stuff out of our way while we're doing construction. And a lot of times that delays our construction. We have to get our contracts bid, we get them awarded, we get our contractors out there, they survey, they do clearing, and then we say, okay, timeout, while it takes sometimes months to get the various utilities in there moved out of our way. And then that can cause delays with our larger construction contracts. It horses up their schedules. It's difficult for them to be efficient. So we parsed out those items and made one bigger contract that covered the 3 years worth of projects that we anticipate happening. And in order to get these sites prepped for the utility relocates before we have construction contracts let out. And we've seen a little bit of benefit of that so far, but if we can get the second or even the third year, we'll see even more next year. We're basically getting further and further ahead of those potential delays. And so when we bid a project, we bid the construction project, it's very, very efficient to just say, your site is ready, here's your notice to proceed, and they can begin working and finish. And so that's our goal with this. And I think it's getting there. And we'll see benefits this season and then even more so in 2024.
Go ahead, sir. Follow up.
Would it be possible to get some kind of analysis like per acre that we're actually end up paying to clear, and so we can compare this against yesterday's contracts, like how they used to clear too,
Yeah, so we have unit pricing per acre. We have an hourly rate for survey work and the other items. We have 1 or 2 other items, I think.
I think through the mayor, I think we can follow up with that later.
Yeah. So
I'm not
sure.
expecting it right now. I would like that sent to me, and so I can read it, I can look at it.
So we'll put that in a weekly post, so it's available publicly and to the whole assembly.
Sure. The details about how they do what the work entails and everything like that. Okay.
Assemblyperson Hale, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. If you could also include, while you're looking at those issues, I heard through the grapevine that Western does not have a professional land surveyor on staff, that they're outsourcing their land surveying. The person with the stamp may in fact live out of state. And I was wondering how the contract is written and such that it allows for something like that.
We require the oversight of any field personnel and anything that they stamp be from the licensed surveyor. They've subcontracted that out.
And that's licensed here in the state of Alaska.
I would check. I'm assuming that's true. I can't remember the sub right off the top of my head. I can get it for you.
Yeah, if you could look into that for me, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, further discussion on AM 23005. Is there any objection to it passing? Hearing no objection, then it passes. There is no unfinished business. There's no vetoes. There's no introductions. Deputy Mayor, would you like to move the vacancy report, please?
I move to approve the recommendations of the mayor as follows. Agriculture Advisory Board, resignation of Code Bus Buse, Board of Equalization, Russell Joyce, Historical Preservation Commission, Vivian Smith, Local Emergency Planning Committee, Tracy Losker and Candace Humphrey, Matsu Borough Fish and Wildlife Commission, resignation of Jesse Sumner, appointment of Robert Yunt, Parks, Recreation, and Trails Advisory Board, Jill Martinson, Bogard RSA 25, Gary Hesmer, Greater Butte RSA number 26, James Stalker.
Any discussion? Any objection to the vacancy report? Okay, hearing none, then the vacancy report is approved. There is no new business. There are no referrals. We do have a reconsideration. And Deputy Mayor, do you have a motion for reconsideration? I'm sorry,
you want me
want
to
you to
read
read
it
it? I don't know, you've talked enough tonight. No, I just.
This
Go
is
ahead.
on the referral of ordinance 23005, an ordinance prohibiting on-site consumption of marijuana until such time as the state of Alaska adopts a numerical standard for operating a vehicle while under the influence of marijuana, or a numerical standard for the presumption of being under the influence of marijuana.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, would you like to move the motion to
Respectfully, I would like to
reconsideration?
not move this.
Pardon?
If everyone's okay with it, I'd like to not move my reconsideration.
Not
So I
move it?
talked to the planning director, and the planning commission is set to introduce this on February 6th. That's as fast as it can be done, and I appreciate that.
Okay. So we don't have a motion to reconsider, right? So we're down now to Mayor, Assembly, and staff comments. Mr. Attorney, I guess we'll start with you. Any additional comments? No? Assemblyperson McKee, additional comments? Assemblyperson 2, additional comments? Assemblyperson Hale?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank the Assembly for your continued support on cleaning up the Bodenberg compound. It really means a lot to me. It was one of the things that catapulted me into running for this position. And, these squatters, these criminals that continue to just find wherever they can and hide out and pollute and steal and deal drugs in our neighborhoods. Chasing these guys around is like playing whack-a-mole. And we're gonna try something new. We're gonna try something we've never done before, which is to actually just take the land and get them out of there and make sure they can't come back. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mhm. Assemblyperson Bonnier? Ron, his comments?
I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I want to thank the Lord for all the blessings that He gives us and all our blessings, and I just want to thank everyone. In Jesus' name, amen.
Manager's comments? Clerk's comments? Deputy Mayor's parting comments?
No comment.
Okay. Stephanie?
Yeah, I
Hours,
have
comments?
a few items I just wanted to let people know about. The AML conference is coming up in Juneau, the 22nd through the 24th of February. So that's a great conference to attend. I went last year and did some meetings with the manager and John Harris and legislators. If you want to register for that, I think the deadline to get in on the room block is January 20th. So there's still a lot of time to register, but the room block may disappear. On the radar that you might have seen a couple of years ago, the university was talking about putting a gravel pit in the middle of the Greenbelt Trail System, which connects to the Crevasse Marine Trail System we were just talking about. You might have seen the university has a public notice out there moving forward with negotiating a conservation easement with Great Land Trust on that property. And that's the result of several stakeholders, including the borough, saying to the university, like, hey, can we find a win-win that benefits the community, that, benefits the university and the community and doesn't just leave us with a hole in the ground? And the gravel went to Anchorage and money went to Fairbanks. And so the borough, City of Palmer, Alaska Farmland Trust, and a bunch of folks have been talking to the university over the last couple of years. And so this is a real step forward, and it's not the end of the process, but it's an opportunity for the university to sit down and see if they could make some money off that property in a way besides putting a gravel pit in the middle of our, second most used or first most used trail system, and also do things that benefit the farm with some of the dollars going back into research and education of the farm, so build some jobs out here. I would ask if with our notice of the vacancy for District 6, if it was possible to post on the website a link to the map of District 6, if it's not already there, just because a lot of people don't know those boundaries. And then just also on my radar, I've been to a couple meetings and we've had discussion about adding gas lines out here in the valley. And I think just something that should be on our radar is there's a lot of discussion about gas supplies running short. Hillcorp in Cook Inlet has been talking about not being able to supply gas in the future in the next short term, 5 to 6 years. There's certainly a lot of gas out in Cook Inlet, but DNR will tell you it's probably expensive gas to get to it. It's going to be the more expensive. So I just think in terms of another risk factor that should be on our radar and thinking about is the energy supply for this valley, because that affects us all, affects what businesses pay. It makes us, sustainable and be able to grow. So I think I hit all of them. Thank you.
Mhm. And I do not have any parting comments, so we will adjourn at 8:21.